Welcome to the Shadow of History channel. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss out more videos like this one. Amidst the rubble of war-torn Austria, a young boy's face radiates pure joy as he clutches a brand new pair of shoes, a simple gift that offered a glimmer of hope during those desperate years of the 1940s. Desperate to maintain a family bond, Berlin residents in 1961 lift their children toward apartment windows, allowing grandparents trapped on the eastern side to catch a fleeting glimpse of the loved ones they can no longer hold. Daring acrobats defy gravity atop the Empire State Building in 1934, executing a heart-stopping performance hundreds of feet above the New York City streets with nothing but their incredible skill and fearless courage to protect them. In 1945, German soldiers sit in stunned, heavy silence while watching footage of concentration camps, forced to finally confront the horrifying reality of the atrocities committed in their nation's name during the long and brutal war. During the 1986 Chernobyl disaster, 3 brave men in Pripyat risked everything by diving into radioactive water to drain a vital pool, successfully preventing a catastrophic steam explosion that would have absolutely devastated the entire European continent. A courageous pigeon named Cher Ami became a decorated hero of World War I after flying through intense enemy fire, despite losing an eye and a leg to deliver a message that saved 200 trapped soldiers. In 1982, photographer Donna Ferrato captured a shocking moment of domestic violence as wealthy swinger Bengt struck his partner Elizabeth, leading to a groundbreaking book that helped pass the Vital Violence But Against Women Act in later years. 3 brave civil rights protesters endure silent humiliation at a whites-only counter in Jackson, Mississippi on May 28, 1963. As an angry mob douses them with condiments while they sit peacefully demanding the dignity of equality. In a heart-wrenching scene from 1940, a small boy in Vancouver clutches his father's leg as soldiers from the Duke of Connaught's own rifles march off to World War II, a moment forever immortalized by Claude Detloff. Childhood friends find themselves on opposite sides of a 1972 workers' strike in France as laborer Guy Bermieux faces Jean-Yvon Antignac, who stands ready in full riot police gear, testing the bonds of their shared past. After 5 agonizing years as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Sturm reunites with his family in 1973 as his daughter Lori runs toward him with open arms in this Pulitzer Prize-winning image. Lena Medina made medical history in Peru on May 14, 1939, when she became the world's youngest mother at just 5 years old, a miracle of biology caused by an extremely rare condition known as precocious puberty. In a 1948 Warsaw home for disturbed children, a young girl named Tereska draws a chaotic web of lines representing her memories of a concentration camp, revealing the deep psychological scars left by years of fear and violence. Brothers Michael and Sean McQuilkin pose playfully with their hair standing on end at California's Morro Rock on August 20, 1975, never realizing they are about to be struck by a massive bolt of lightning moments later. Engineering history was made in Alba Iulia, Romania in 1987 when construction workers successfully moved an entire 7,600-ton apartment building 55 meters in just 6 hours to clear a path for a grand new city boulevard. Standing pregnant with her 5th child in 1948, a desperate mother named Lucille Chalafou attempts to sell her 4 children after her husband lost his job, a tragic testament to the crushing poverty of the post-war era. A couple clutches each other in absolute anguish on a California beach after their 19-month-old son wandered into the surf and vanished, a heartbreaking scene captured by John Gaunt in his 1954 Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph. two sisters arrested in Minnesota around 1921 pose with defiant smirks after being caught moonshining and guarding their family's illegal liquor operation during the height of Prohibition, proving that crime was often a family affair. Long before his tragic end, the future Tsar Nicholas II stands in traditional Japanese dress at just 23 years old during an official diplomatic visit to Nagasaki in 1891, bridging the gap between two very different empires. Detroit plunges into a haunting semi-darkness during a 1942 wartime blackout drill, leaving only the faint glow of streetlights and factory windows visible across the industrial landscape for 15 tense minutes of practice defense. Between 1974 and 1976, Jeffrey Epstein worked as a physics and mathematics teacher at Manhattan's prestigious Dalton School, leading a seemingly ordinary life decades before his horrific crimes would eventually shock the entire world. A young hippie couple embraces amidst the mud of Max Yasgur's farm in 1969, perfectly embodying the peace and love movement that defined a generation during the legendary Woodstock Music Festival that changed culture forever. As the devastation of World War II finally draws to a conclusion, in 1945, a weary soldier takes a rare, quiet moment to enjoy the stillness of a cool day, reflecting on the long road home. In the quiet dawn of 1939, a local milkman makes his daily rounds, dropping off fresh glass bottles and collecting empties before the neighborhood awakens, maintaining a simple morning ritual that once connected every community together. Two icons of 1960s. Elegance and power meet at the White House in 1961 as Princess Grace of Monaco visits President John F. Kennedy, a sophisticated moment in diplomacy that remains captured for history to admire. The February 1970 cover of Circus magazine pulses with the electric energy of rock and roll's golden age, using bold graphics and a rebellious spirit to speak to a youth culture that was rapidly transforming the world. A pigeon equipped with a tiny camera flies a secret reconnaissance mission during World War I, part of an experimental aerial photography program developed in Germany around the 1910s that predated the modern era of drones. In 1873, photographer Timothy O'Sullivan documented the traditional way of life for the Navajo people near Old Fort Defiance, New Mexico, capturing a dignified culture in the American Southwest before the arrival of modern industry. Magnificent shafts of sunlight pierce through the towering windows of Grand Central Terminal in 1954, illuminating thousands of commuters as they rush through the Beaux-Arts masterpiece during the bustling peak of New York's mid-century era. In a desperate bid for freedom, a family drops their young son into a rescue sheet held by West Berlin firefighters in 1961 as they escape an apartment building that stood directly on the newly erected border. First-class passengers on Swiss Air enjoy the peak of luxury during the 1960s, golden age of air travel, featuring spacious seating, elegant meal service, and panoramic views from high above the clouds in a truly sophisticated era. Before, the shadows of war transformed the European landscape forever. Wolfgang Suschitzky captured the peaceful rhythm of daily life along Amsterdam's picturesque Prinsengracht Canal during a quiet afternoon in the spring of 1934. In 1965, photographer Bill Ray documented the gritty lives of Hells Angels motorcycle club members in California, capturing a raw and lawless counterculture that both fascinated and frightened the mainstream American public during a turbulent decade. A high school student in 1944 is caught by Nina Lean's camera as she secretly passes a handwritten note to her classmate, capturing a timeless moment of teenage mischief that persisted even during the height of wartime. Gary Coleman and David Hasselhoff share a genuine, lighthearted moment on the set of Different. Strokes in 1984, a candid behind-the-scenes look at two television legends during the height of their global fame and popularity. Southern California surfers ride the rolling Pacific waves during the 1960s, helping to define the laid-back beach culture and sun-drenched lifestyle that would eventually spread from the coast to the rest of the world. Red Sox star Jim Rice instinctively scooped up a 4-year-old boy struck by a foul ball at Fenway Park on August 8, 1982, rushing him directly to the dugout for the life-saving medical treatment he required. In a rare and tender moment from 1993, grunge icon Kurt Cobain gently introduces his infant daughter to a tiny kitten, showing a soft side of the legendary musician shortly before his life came to a tragic end. Nelson Mandela raises his fist in a powerful gesture of defiance through the barred windows of a prison van in 1964, moments after being sentenced to life imprisonment for his brave fight against South African apartheid. A Soviet family gathers closely around their radio in the 1920s to listen to an evening broadcast marveling at the revolutionary new technology that was rapidly transforming communication and connecting people across the vast new nation. The legendary Lady Hercules, Katie Sandwina, effortlessly holds 3 grown men above her head in the 1910s, a feat of strength that cemented her fame after she famously defeated Eugen Sandow in a high-stakes weightlifting contest. Soldiers and cameramen stand in awe of the terrifying small boy nuclear test in Nevada during 1962, witnessing the immense power of atomic weapons as part of the military's Operation Sunbeam research into modern warfare. Australian heavyweight boxer Peter Jackson poses for a dignified studio portrait in 1889, remembered today as one of the most technically proficient and scientific fighters of his era, despite the racial barriers he faced in sports. A 15-year-old messenger boy for the Mackay Telegraph Company faces the harsh reality of the red light district in Waco, Texas during 1913, a scene documented by Lewis Hine to expose the dangers of child labor. Stockholm's extraordinary Telefon Tornet Tower rises into the sky around 1890, its massive metallic framework connecting over 5,000 telephone lines before a devastating fire finally destroyed the architectural marvel in the winter of 1952. Just 21 years old, Lincoln assassination conspirator Lewis Powell poses under heavy guard in 1865, his chillingly calm expression captured shortly before he was hanged for his role in the deadly plot against the American president. Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong trained rigorously near a lunar lander mock-up in the spring of 1969, perfecting their movements for the historic Apollo 11 moon landing that was only a few short months away from changing history. Bedouin nomads pose for a striking portrait. In the 1890s, their traditional dress and dignified bearing captured by early photographers before the forces of modernization would forever change their ancient and nomadic way of life. Rows of classic cars fill the lot at Sandia, Francisco's Rancho Drive-In Theater at dusk in 1948, as families gather for the quintessentially American pastime of watching movies under the stars on a warm summer evening. A mother and daughter ham it up for the camera around 1900, sharing a rare and joyful moment of early photography when posing for a picture was still a novel and very special occasion for most families. The 1969 Woodstock Festival swells to over 400,000 attendees, nearly 8 times what organizers expected, creating 3 legendary days of peace and music that would ultimately define an entire generation of American youth. A beautiful woman poses with effortless grace in 1912, her elegant Edwardian fashion and serene expression perfectly capturing the refined style and quiet sophistication of the era just before the world changed forever. Proving that the desire to document romantic moments transcends time and technology, a young couple uses their camera's self-timer to capture a charming selfie during a quiet afternoon spent together in the summer of 1959. Frida Kahlo works intently on her powerful painting, The Two Fridas, in 1939, captured by photographer Tina Modotti, as the artist explores deep themes of duality, identity, and heartbreak in her sun-drenched studio in Mexico. In a massive engineering feat between 1964 and 1968, the ancient temples of Abu Simbel were carefully dismantled and relocated to save them from the rising floodwaters caused by the construction of Egypt's Aswan High Dam. The front page of the New York Daily News from October 31, 1938, reports on the widespread panic caused by Orson Welles' realistic radio broadcast of War of the Worlds, which terrified millions of listeners across the country. Between 1943 and 1945, Carl Meidens photographed the Allied Army's Italian campaign in vivid color, providing a raw and rare look at the brutal reality of World War II's difficult mountain fighting through the heart of Italy. Neil Young poses for a quiet portrait in New York City during 1970, captured by Joel Bernstein, just as the singer-songwriter's legendary solo career began to take off and reshape the landscape of folk and rock music. Annie Edson Taylor, a courageous 63-year-old schoolteacher, stands proudly with her cat and the wooden barrel she rode over Niagara Falls in 1901, becoming the first person ever to survive the legendary and death-defying stunt. The Statue of Liberty glows with a golden hue at sunrise in 1978, as David Allen Harvey captures the iconic symbol of freedom standing watch, while dawn breaks over the quiet waters of New York Harbor. During the 1960s, Soviet police utilized detailed phenotype charts to identify potential suspects based on their ethnicity, a disturbing historical example of how racial profiling was systematically used within the framework of state law enforcement. Click Photo Parade magazine offers a fascinating look at vintage dating advice for single women in 1938, reflecting the rigid social expectations and traditional gender roles that governed romantic life in the years before the war. The tallest German soldier of World War II, 7'3", Jakob Nacken, chats amiably with 5'3" British Corporal Bob Roberts after surrendering near Calais in 1944, creating a striking visual contrast between two former enemies. Johnny Cash waits in the shadows backstage in White Plains, New York during 1959, captured by Marvin Koner in a quiet moment of reflection during the early years of the Eobide Sadi, country legend's iconic and rebellious career. A bustling Parisian street scene from 1928 captures the vibrant daily life and timeless charm of the City of Light during the golden years between the two world wars, before history would once again intervene. John F. Kennedy campaigns through the rugged hills of West Virginia in 1960, connecting personally with local voters whose crucial support would eventually help propel the young senator to the presidency of the United States. Two unidentified women pose for a formal portrait in London around 1890, their elaborate Victorian dresses and serious expressions offering a window into the rigid social etiquette and photographic styles of the late 19th century. The cast and crew gather on the foggy set of A.R. Nightmare on Elm Street in 1984, working together to create the legendary horror classic that would haunt the dreams of theater audiences for many generations to come. Women sit patiently beneath massive metallic hair dryers from the 1920s through the 1940s, enduring the lengthy and elaborate beauty treatments required to achieve the perfectly coiffed and fashionable hairstyles of the 20th century. In 1939, NYPD criminologist Roy Post demonstrates his curious postometer, a modified lie detector specifically designed to measure the emotional intensity and physical sincerity of a kiss during the height of scientific experimentation. The weary and hardened face of Soviet soldier Evgeny Stepanovich Kobitev tells the harrowing story of 4 brutal years spent fighting on the UR front lines from 1941 to 1945 during the Great Patriotic War. London traffic flows through the historic city streets between 1910 and 1937, a transformative era where traditional horse-drawn carriages gradually gave way to the noisy and modern motorcars that would soon dominate the urban landscape. A man strolls through a park with his loyal dog during the 1920s, capturing a quiet and timeless bond between human and canine companion that remains unchanged despite the many decades that have passed since. A mother and her young daughter walk through the busy streets of New York City in 1970, their colorful and fashionable outfits perfectly reflecting the distinctive and vibrant style that defined the era's unique cultural aesthetic. Coca-Cola officially arrives in France in 1950 as photographer Mark Kaufman captures the moment American consumer culture began to spread across post-war Europe, bringing a taste of the United States to a rebuilding continent. Heavy snow blankets the ancient city of Jerusalem in 1921, a rare and magical weather event that transformed the desert landscape into a stunning winter wonderland for the residents who lived within its historic walls. In 1998, French photographer Antoine Agougian captured a poignant moment as an old man named Ishran dances through tears in Aparan, Armenia, having mistaken the photographer for the beloved son he had lost years before. In a seemingly innocent high school photo from the late 1990s, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold pose with their classmates years before. They would commit the horrific Columbine shooting massacre that changed American schools forever. MIT physicist Harold Edgerton used pioneering strobe light techniques to capture the exact terrifying moment of a nuclear explosion at the Nevada Proving Grounds on June 5, 1952, revealing details never before seen by the human eye. Refugees desperately scramble across the twisted remains of a destroyed bridge over North Korea's Taedong River in 1950, a Pulitzer Prize-winning image by Max Desfor that captured the true scale of wartime suffering and human desperation. Opera legend Maria Callas screams in genuine outrage after being served a breach of contract lawsuit at Chicago's Civic Opera House on November 17, 1955, famously vowing never to perform in the city again. Guitar legend Eddie Van Halen performs with his signature lightning-fast style and infectious energy years before his death in 2020, having completely revolutionized rock music with his innovative techniques and custom-built instruments that inspired millions. George Lucas stands alongside Peter Mayhew in his full Chewbacca costume on the set of Star Wars in 1976, working together to create the beloved Wookiee character that would eventually captivate the imaginations of audiences worldwide. A hippie father walks hand in hand with his young daughter through the streets of Amsterdam in 1968, perfectly embodying the era's countercultural values of peace, freedom, and a new way of raising the next generation. Billionaire John D. Rockefeller gifts a simple 5-cent coin to a young child in 1929, a gesture that was seen as both generous and ironic, coming from one of the wealthiest men in all of human history. Naval Lieutenant Don Walsh and Jacques Picard photographed themselves at the bottom of the Challenger, deep on January 23, 1960, after their submersible's window cracked during the record-breaking and historic descent into the abyss. In 1970, the man who originally modeled for the iconic Uncle Sam recruitment poster stands proudly beside his own image decades after helping to create one of the most recognizable and enduring symbols of American patriotism. A local milk delivery man carries fresh glass bottles on his morning rounds in 1950, performing the essential daily service that brought dairy directly to American doorsteps in the years before the rise of the modern supermarket. More than 11,000 runners surge across the Verrazano Narrows Bridge at the start of the 1978 New York City Marathon, a spectacular sight captured by Suzanne Vlamus from high atop the bridge's massive steel tower. Sydney's Justice and Police Museum preserves a collection of striking criminal mugshots from the 1920s, documenting the sharp-dressed faces and hard stares of the men and women who once inhabited Australia's gritty urban underworld. The Peacekeeper missile system deploys multiple nuclear warheads over Kwajalein Atoll in 1984, each one capable of carrying 25 times the destructive power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, a chilling display of Cold War might. Vintage Halloween costumes from decades past often look more terrifying than festive, reflecting a simpler time when homemade outfits relied far more on dark imagination than the polished, store-bought convenience of the modern world. A dedicated Red Cross nurse serves on the front lines during the World War I, providing essential medical care and gentle comfort to wounded soldiers amidst the unprecedented carnage and chaos of the world's first modern conflict. German soldiers wearing primitive gas masks operate an anti-aircraft gun against low-flying enemy planes in 1916, fighting a brutal war that introduced horrifying new technologies and forever changed the nature of global combat. 15-year-old Vance works as a trapper boy at Alabama's Bessie Mine around 1910, earning just 75 cents for 10 hours spent in total darkness, opening and closing doors for passing coal cars to feed his family. A group of Princeton students pose for a photo immediately after an epic snowball fight. In 1893, their battered faces and triumphant expressions perfectly capturing the youthful exuberance and competitive spirit at the prestigious university. A young boy sits quietly reading a book amidst the smoking rubble of a bombed London bookshop on October 8, 1940, finding a temporary escape in literature despite the immense devastation and danger surrounding him. Korean children play together in the war-torn streets of Seoul during March 1951, their resilient innocence persisting even as their nation was being torn apart by the brutal and destructive forces of a global conflict. David Attenborough feeds Benjamin the Malaysian sun bear in Borneo during his 1956 wildlife documentary, Zoo Quest, a historic moment that helped launch the legendary broadcaster's peerless career as the world's leading nature presenter. The cast and crew share a relaxed moment behind the scenes of Pulp Fiction in 1993, working alongside director Quentin Tarantino to create the groundbreaking film that would ultimately revolutionize the world of independent cinema forever. Wearing a specialized helmet filled with measured smog, Betty Cook undergoes a blink test at the Stanford Research Institute on April 27, 1949, as scientists meticulously study the painful eye irritation caused by rising air pollution. Winston Churchill and Charlie Chaplin share a rare and jovial moment together in 1929, bringing the worlds of global politics and silent film entertainment together in one of the 20th century's most iconic and influential meetings. Inside the Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company in 1903, weary laborers toil amidst the heat and heavy machinery of the Tarentum factory, capturing the gritty reality of the Industrial Revolution before modern safety standards ever existed. The Beatles visit a young Cassius Clay at his Miami training camp in 1964, famously meeting the future Muhammad Ali just days before he shocked the world by defeating Sonny Liston in their historic heavyweight title fight. British postal workers don heavy gas masks during a 1937 training exercise at the Eastwood Park Anti-Gas School, a hauntingly prophetic preparation for the chemical warfare many feared would soon return to the skies of Europe. 13-year-old Brian Sullivan confidently navigates the bustling and gritty streets of New York City. In 1972, his daily adventures captured by photographer Bill Ray during one of the most culturally tumultuous eras in American history. 91-year-old old man Gray Mountain sits by a warm fire in Arizona during 1948, sharing sacred Navajo legends with his grandchildren to ensure their ancient stories and tribal traditions survive for yet another resilient generation. Encased in a towering shell of protective bricks at Florence's Galleria dell'Accademia, Michelangelo's David stands hidden from view between 1941 and 1945 to safeguard the priceless Renaissance masterpiece from the devastating impact of World War II bombing. Young John F. Kennedy Jr. beams with delight while sitting in the pilot seat of the presidential helicopter during a 1963 weekend trip to Camp David, a candid family moment captured by White House photographer Robert Knudsen. Standing an incredible 6 feet 6 inches tall, the massive red roan Belgian stallion Brooklyn Supreme weighed over 3,000 pounds during his prime in the 1930s, likely setting the record for the heaviest horse ever known. Sweden experiences total transportation chaos on September 3, 1967, a day known as Dagen H, when the entire nation famously switched from driving on the left to the right-hand side of the road almost overnight. The pure wonder of discovery illuminates 5-year-old Harold Whittles' face in 1974 as he hears sound for the very first time after receiving a hearing aid, a deeply emotional moment captured forever by photographer Jack Bradley. August Landmesser stands with his arms defiantly crossed amidst a sea of saluting workers in Hamburg during 1936, a courageous and solitary act of resistance against the Nazi regime that would eventually become a symbol of bravery. Helen Levitt captures the vibrant spirit of New York City's youth during the 1940s, documenting in children as they transform simple city streets into imaginative playgrounds despite the looming shadows and global anxieties of the ongoing war. A young Carrie Fisher gazes up in pure adoration at her mother Debbie Reynolds during a 1963 stage performance years before she would follow in those famous footsteps to become a legendary cinematic icon herself as Princess Leia. Londoners transform cold subway platforms into makeshift communities during the Blitz seeking safety in the underground as German bombs rain down on the city above throughout the long and terrifying nights of the 1940s. Amidst the wreckage of 1944, 2 American soldiers take a brief moment to comfort a distressed young girl clutching a tiny puppy, offering a rare glimpse of human tenderness during the brutal and unforgiving Italian campaign. Long before he was a household name, a struggling young comedian named Jim Carrey hails a taxi in the early 1980s, living a humble life in the city, years before his rubber-faced antics made him a superstar. In the 1970s, the world's information was stored not in the cloud, but within massive library card catalogs and paper encyclopedias, requiring a physical journey through the stacks to find the answers we now get instantly. Christmas in the early 1920s was a quiet and heartfelt affair defined by hand-carved wooden toys and simple evergreen decorations that reflected a much less commercial era of holiday celebration than the one we know today. People bathed together in the cooling waters of a Japanese river during the ice-sweltering summer of 1915, enjoying a communal tradition of public bathing that has remained a vital part of the nation's social fabric for centuries. A little girl sits stoically among the ruins of her bombed-out home in 1940, clutching her only remaining doll in a heartbreaking image that perfectly illustrates the stolen innocence of childhood during the height of the war. Crouched in a muddy trench, a German soldier carefully pens a letter home during World War II, desperately trying to maintain a bridge of love to his family across the vast distance and horror of the battlefield. Texas cowboy C.H. Long finds a moment of gentle respite from his rugged ranch work in 1949 as he sits on a porch playing with a litter of tiny kittens, a scene captured by Leonard Macomb. Led Zeppelin travels in unmatched rock and roll style aboard their private jet, the Starship, in 1975, a legendary era of musical excess where the band lived like royalty while touring the stadiums of North America. Suspended hundreds of feet above the New York City streets in 1932, steelworkers enjoy a formal lunch served by waiters on a narrow girder during the high-stakes construction of the iconic Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Racial justice icons, including Martin Luther King Jr. and a Philip Randolph, gather for a somber portrait in 1963, standing together as the strategic architects of the historic March on Washington that changed the course of history. A North American B-25 Mitchell bomber flies past the towering ash cloud of Mount Vesuvius in March 1944 ABE. Rare and spectacular moment where the forces of natural volcanic fury met the mechanical might of World War II. Volkswagen promotes its practical and reliable station wagon to the American public in 1964, using clever advertising and German engineering to win over families during the brand's massive expansion into the competitive United States automotive market. In a bizarre standoff from 1988, the director of the Belgrade Zoo calmly negotiates with an escaped chimpanzee on a rooftop, eventually convincing the animal to return home peacefully in this truly remarkable and humorous photograph. Tropical Miami is transformed into a surreal winter wonderland in 1977 as snow falls on the city for the first and only time in recorded history, leaving residents in absolute awe of the white dust on palm trees. Mehran Karimi Nasseri, the Iranian refugee who famously inspired the film, The Terminal sits amidst his belongings in Charles de Gaulle Airport in 2004, having lived within the terminal's walls for 18 extraordinary and complicated years. Irish revolutionary Michael Collins pauses to accept a simple bouquet of flowers from a young child in Cork, a brief moment of warmth and local connection during the intense and bloody struggle for Irish independence in 1922. Shorpy Higginbotham works a dangerous shift as a greaser at an Alabama mine around 1910, claiming to be 14 years old while risking his life daily among the heavy coal cars to support his struggling family. A Russian farmer and his sons pose outside their home in the village of Grand Pexely in 1910, providing a rare and vivid look at rural life in the Russian Empire just years before the Great Revolution. An Italian family shares a sun-drenched picnic during the 1960s, enjoying the simple pleasures of good food and loud laughter in a timeless scene that captures the enduring warmth and togetherness of the traditional Mediterranean lifestyle. Residents across Beijing frantically beat drums and pots to scare away sparrows during the 1958 Four Pests campaign, a well-intentioned but tragic part of the Great Leap Forward that eventually led to a massive ecological disaster. Reflecting an era when the dangers of tobacco were largely ignored, a hospital patient in the 1950s casually buys a pack of cigarettes directly from his bed, a jarring sight. eye to modern viewers accustomed to smoke-free facilities. Campers experienced the ultimate in 1950s luxury with a customized Chevrolet Bel Air station wagon featuring a creative treehouse-style camper on top, perfectly blending mid-century automotive style with the great American call of the outdoors. A Minneapolis woman begins the grueling multi-day process of doing laundry in 1910, a world of heavy lifting and boiling water that required soaking, starching, and hand-pressing every single garment before the invention of modern home appliances. While Allied troops struggled in muddy trenches, German soldiers during World War I often lived in sophisticated underground dugouts, complete with electric lights and wooden furniture, creating a surprising level of subterranean comfort amidst the surrounding carnage. Students in a 1960s shop class focus intently on their woodworking projects, learning the hands-on craftsmanship and mechanical skills that were once considered an essential and practical part of every young person's well-rounded public education. Facing an unfathomable reality on September 11, 2001, a person trapped on the 107th floor of the North Tower gazes out from the windows on the World Restaurant, caught in a moment of profound and heartbreaking human choice. As the clock strikes midnight on July 1, 1997, Prince Charles speaks at the emotional handover ceremony in Hong Kong, officially marking the end of over a century of British colonial rule and the territory's return to China. In a stark illustration of the cruelty of 1956, our apartheid, a young white girl sits on a park bench while her black maid is forced to stand nearby, forbidden by law from sitting beside the child she cares for. A very young Slash poses with his first girlfriend at a Los Angeles junior high school in 1978, a typical teenage moment captured years before the top-hatted guitarist would go on to define the sound of hard rock. A man drops to one knee to propose to his girlfriend on the edge of Hawaii's Mount Kilauea, just as the volcano erupts behind them, creating a spectacularly dramatic and fiery backdrop for a truly unforgettable romantic commitment. Standing beside a life-sized photograph of Robert Wadlow, the 7'1" Shaquille O'Neal appears surprisingly small next to the 8'11" giant of Illinois, highlighting the incredible and rare variations of the human frame throughout modern history. In 2012, 11-year-old Liam Corcoran managed to sneak past 5 security checkpoints at Manchester Airport without a passport or ticket, successfully boarding a jet and flying all the way to Rome before anyone realized he was missing. A little French girl leans in to kiss an American soldier on Valentine's Day in 1945, a simple but powerful gesture of gratitude toward the young liberators who had finally freed her village from years of Nazi occupation. A stylish couple uses their camera's timer to capture a self-portrait in 1951, proving that the desire to document our own lives was alive and well decades before the smartphone turned the selfie into a global obsession. In a display of nerves as strong as steel, a man in South Dakota proposes to his fiancée as a massive and terrifying tornado swirls in the background, creating one of the most intense and dramatic engagement photos ever. A young American soldier shares a final tearful embrace with his mother in 1917 before departing for the battlefields of Europe, a tender goodbye that sadly served as the last moment they would ever spend together. The thundering roar of Niagara Falls falls silent in 1911 as the massive cascades freeze into a solid and spectacular wall of ice, during one of the coldest and most exceptional winters ever recorded in North American history. Women dressed in fashionable Western clothing walked through the vibrant streets of Kabul in 1979, capturing a brief window of freedom and modernity in Afghanistan before decades of war and restrictive rule would change their lives. Floating a staggering 320 feet away from the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1984, astronaut Bruce McCandless becomes the first human to perform an untethered spacewalk drifting through the silent void of space using only a nitrogen-powered jetpack. A breathtaking aerial view of Mount Rushmore reveals the massive scale of the monument and the incredible engineering required to carve the 60-foot presidential faces into the solid granite of South Dakota's Black Hills during the 1930s. The stunning architecture of Prague's Old Town remains virtually unchanged between 1910 and the present day, having miraculously survived the destruction of 2 world wars and decades of political upheaval to preserve its historic European charm. Enona Bugeisha, a female warrior of Japan's feudal upper class, poses with her traditional weapon and full armor in the 1800s, representing a long and proud history of women who fought to protect their homes and honor. In a show of Cold War resolve, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher rides in a Challenger 1 tank during a 1986 visit to troops in West Germany, projecting strength during the final tense years of the divided continent. During a heated 1960 campaign stop in Texas, Lyndon B.I. Johnson famously yells at nearby pilots to cut their noisy engines, while a calm John F. Kennedy stands beside him trying to maintain focus amidst the political chaos. Frank Tenney Johnson's masterful painting, A Light in the Night, uses dramatic shadows and a single flickering flame to capture the quiet romance and deep solitude of life on the American frontier during the late 19th century. Mineral Park, Arizona appears as a bustling and hopeful mining hub in the 1880s, filled with pioneers seeking their fortune before the silver veins eventually ran dry and the town was abandoned to the desert as a ghost town. 21-year-old Bess Meyerson makes history in 1945 by becoming the first Jewish contestant to win the Miss America pageant, a significant cultural victory for the New York native, just as the world learned the horrors of the Holocaust. A group of youngsters skateboard through the hilly streets of New York City in 1965, using primitive boards to pioneer a rebellious new sport that would eventually explode into a multi-billion-dollar global cultural phenomenon. Audience members at Hollywood's Paramount Theater lean forward in their 3D glasses during the 1952 premiere of Buona Devil, the very first full-length color 3D movie that promised to bring the action right into the viewer's laps. Captured in 1979, a young and unknown dancer named Madonna rides a New York City bus, living a quiet and anonymous life. Years before, she would reinvent herself and become the undisputed queen of global pop music. San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge begins to stretch across the treacherous strait in 1934 as construction workers at Fort Point assemble the massive steel towers of what would soon become the most famous bridge in the world. Martin Luther King Jr. stands at the front of a massive crowd of marchers traveling from Selma to Montgomery in 1965, leading a peaceful but powerful movement to secure the voting rights of African Americans in the South. The Iranian delegation to the International Council of Women poses for a portrait in the mid-1970s, representing a sophisticated and modern nation just years before the Islamic Revolution would fundamentally alter the social and legal status of women. Masons and laborers worked carefully on the massive white columns of the Lincoln Memorial in 1915, building the Adwaita neoclassical temple that would eventually serve as the most enduring and solemn symbol of American democracy and national unity. In a rare diplomatic meeting, Generalissimo Francisco Franco of Spain sits with Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, two autocratic leaders whose long and complicated reigns would come to define their respective nations for much of the century. New York's massive municipal building rises above City Hall Park in 1911, its grand Beaux-Arts design taking shape to provide a centralized home for the rapidly growing government offices of the world's most bustling and modern metropolis. Using early photographic technology in 1914, Mark Ferrez documents the Baroque grandeur of Rio de Janeiro's municipal theater, capturing the intricate details of the building's facade as it stood as a centerpiece of Brazilian cultural pride. The battle-hardened men of the North Longford Flying Column pose with their rifles in 1920, representing the grassroots guerrilla fighters who waged a fierce and successful campaign during the Irish War of Independence against the British Crown.